On a September morning in 2025, what should have been just another school drop-off in Chicago's South Loop turned into a tragedy that would shake an entire community. Romeca Meeks Blackman, a 31-year-old nursing student and devoted mother, kissed her 6-year-old son goodbye and sent him into school. Moments later, she was shot multiple times in broad daylight. The suspect walked free that same day, sparking outrage across the city. But now, nearly 4 months later, the wheels of justice are finally turning. Let's break down what's happening right now in this case.
About that deadly shooting in the South Loop back in September, a young mother got killed.
Yeah. Quadajah Holly Johnson is accused of shooting Romeca Blackman. Johnson says it was self-defense.
Well, after new charges were filed last week, Johnson was back in court today. Tia Ewing's got more on what happened. Tia.
A lot has happened, Terrence and Sylvia, since we started reporting this story. And this is 20 pages of documents that I had to pour over today. We already reported on the murder charge, but now there are 5 more charges. This court document filed just this week in my hands lays out the defense's argument for why bond consideration should be granted to the 31-year-old pregnant mom. The motion argues that the responsibility to prove the case lies entirely with prosecutors. The defense says the state has not met that burden, pointing out that Johnson has no prior criminal history. She had a license to carry a firearm. Still, the state has said the victim, Romeca Blackman, did not have a gun. Now, let's go through some of the pages of this document. The first few pages outlines why Johnson is claiming self-defense, saying she was protecting herself and her 6-month-old child that was in the car when Blackman, quote, ran up and swung. According to the filing, Blackman repeatedly threatened Johnson through phone calls and text messages. The threats escalated to the point that Blackman allegedly told Johnson's grandmother she intended to kill her. At the time, Johnson was pregnant and, according to her attorney, feared for her life and the safety of her unborn child. They also say an order of protection was granted months before the shooting, though we found one that was never delivered. Now, on the morning of the shooting, that was September 8th last year, Johnson was being driven back to her car by her child's father when Blackman unexpectedly arrived. She had just dropped off her son in that area. Both women have children by the same man. The motion claims Blackman allegedly blocked Johnson's vehicle, approached her aggressively and said, "I told y'all I was going to catch you."
The shooting happened on September 8th, 2025, around 9 in the morning on Cermak Road near State Street. Romeca had just dropped off her son when she encountered Quadajah Holly Johnson and Carlos Smith. What started as a confrontation quickly turned fatal. Smith allegedly held Romeca in a chokehold while Johnson retrieved a gun and fired multiple shots into Romeca's face. Most hauntingly, witnesses reported seeing Johnson and Smith exchange a fist bump while Romeca lay dying. That image alone is enough to turn your stomach. The brutality of it, the callousness, the sheer disregard for human life in front of a school where children were present. It's unconscionable. Here's where the story gets even more disturbing. Johnson was taken into custody that day, but released without charges. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office claimed there was insufficient evidence to proceed. Think about that for a second. Multiple witnesses, video footage, and a woman lying dead. Yet the suspect walked free. The community erupted. Romeca's mother, Tina McMiller, demanded answers. Petitions circulated online, gathering thousands of signatures. People couldn't understand how someone could shoot another person in broad daylight near a school and simply go home. For 3 months, the family waited. 3 months of grief, anger, and frustration while Johnson remained free. Finally, on December 3rd, 2025, Chicago police arrested Johnson at her Des Plaines home. She was charged with first-degree murder. The following day, she appeared in court for a detention hearing. Now 7 weeks pregnant. The courtroom had to be changed because so many supporters of Romeca showed up wearing pink, her favorite color. Judge James Costello presided over the hearing, and what he heard painted a grim picture of what happened that September morning. Prosecutors laid out their case in detail. They presented evidence showing that Johnson had filed a stalking order against Romeca back in December 2024, claiming Romeca had made threats to family members. The order was granted in July, but was never served to Romeca, meaning she had no legal notice of it. Many in Romeca's family believed Johnson was building a paper trail, creating a narrative that would support a self-defense claim if things ever escalated. And that's exactly what Johnson is claiming now, self-defense. But here's the problem with that defense. According to witness testimony presented by prosecutors, Romeca was standing with her arms crossed when the confrontation began. Johnson advanced toward her. Smith, the father of both women's children, slammed a car door on Romecca repeatedly, and then put her in a chokehold from behind. When Romecca broke free, Johnson walked to her vehicle, retrieved her legally owned firearm, and shot Romecca once. Then she paused. Then she fired again. And again. 3 shots total. Prosecutors recovered 3 9mm casings from the scene. Judge Costello made his position clear during the hearing. He stated that celebrating in the street after shooting someone does not constitute self-defense. The fist bump. The casual nature of the violence. These details mattered. Johnson was denied bond in order to remain in custody. Now, as we look deep into this unfolding case, think about the impact this has had on not just the family, but on the community fighting for justice. How will it all unfold? Stay tuned to this channel to get the latest updates as they happen. We'll be covering every development. On January 8th, 2026, Johnson returned to court facing a major escalation. 5 additional counts alongside the original first-degree murder charge. While the full details of these counts are just emerging, the strategy is clear. While the specific nature of these additional charges hasn't been fully detailed in public reports, their addition signals that prosecutors are likely stacking charges for the use of a firearm near a school and the endangerment of the children and parents who were just feet away during the gunfire. This signals they aren't just looking for a conviction. They are looking for the maximum penalty. The prosecution strategy appears focused on dismantling any possibility of a successful self-defense claim. They're emphasizing the premeditated nature of the act. Johnson didn't just happen to have a gun on her. She legally owned it and had a concealed carry license. But the question prosecutors are asking is simple. Why bring a gun to a location where you know you might encounter someone you have an order of protection against? Why not avoid the situation entirely? And most damning, why pause between shots? Johnson's defense team is fighting back hard. They've filed motions challenging the credibility of the state's key witnesses. They're arguing that evidence, including 911 recordings and surveillance video, contradicts the prosecution's narrative. During the January 8 hearing, they requested Johnson's release pending trial, citing her pregnancy and claiming that she acted in fear for her life. The judge denied that request. Johnson remains in Cook County Jail. Carlos Smith, the man at the center of this tragedy, spoke publicly for the first time during the recent court hearing. He shares a child with both Romecca and Johnson, placing him at the intersection of this nightmare. Smith vehemently denied the prosecution's version of events. He told reporters outside the courthouse that he never put Romecca in a headlock, never beat her with a car door, and was only trying to defuse the situation. He called the prosecution's account lies and insisted that the truth would eventually come out. But here's the thing. Multiple independent witnesses contradicted Smith's claims. People who didn't know any of the parties involved reported seeing him physically assault Romecca before the shooting.
I'm just tired of the lies and everything, what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her. I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to diffuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that.
Carlos Smith, we interviewed him before. He's at the center of a case that has devastated 2 families. Today, a judge heard arguments over whether the woman accused of pulling the trigger should remain behind bars and ultimately made a decision. Smith shares a child with Romecca Blackman, the 31-year-old mother who was shot and killed, and with Quadajah Holly Johnson, the woman now charged in Blackman's death. Prosecutors say Johnson shot Blackman during a confrontation in Chicago's South Loop on September 8th last year. Johnson, who was licensed to carry a firearm, has claimed that she feared for her life. In court today, Johnson's attorney argued for her release, but documents show that motion was denied.
Do you believe the justice system will deliver the truth for Romecca and her family? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation alive. Together we can stay informed and support those seeking justice. The emotional toll of this case extends far beyond the courtroom. Romecca's mother, Tina McMiller, is now raising Romecca's son, who turned 7 years old just days after his mother was killed. In the weeks following the shooting, he kept asking where his mommy was. Imagine having to explain to a child that his mother isn't coming home because of violence tied to the very people who should have been part of his support system. The grief is incomprehensible. The community responded with an outpouring of support. On September 13th, 2025, just days after the shooting, a vigil was held for Romecca in West Englewood at Englewood STEM High School. Thousands of pink, white, and silver balloons were released into the sky. Pink was Romecca's color, and her loved ones wore it proudly. A memorial board was posted where people could write messages of love and loss. The vigil became a space for collective mourning, but also for demanding action. McMiller stood before the crowd and called for an end to gun violence. She invoked the Illinois Health Reform Act from 2021, which includes mental health resources, arguing that more must be done to prevent these tragedies. The case also sparked broader activism around domestic violence. Community leaders joined McMiller in calling for enforcement of House Bill 158, a state law that declares violence a public health crisis. They emphasized that Romeca's death wasn't just a personal tragedy, but a symptom of systemic failures in how society addresses domestic violence, protective orders, and gun access. Romeca was a victim of mental abuse and domestic violence. Her family says the protective order Johnson filed was supposed to keep people safe, but instead, it became part of narrative used to justify violence. In late December 2025, something beautiful happened amid the pain. A Secret Santa from ENR Towing showed up with gifts and a $3,500 check for Romeca's son and his grandmother. It was a gesture of kindness in the darkest of times. McMiller also took her grandson to a toy drive in Englewood, where he helped hand out gifts to other children. She said she wanted to give him the best Christmas his mother would have given him. That's the kind of strength it takes to keep going when your world has been shattered. There are also plans in the works to develop land at 65th and Parnell into a community center with dedicated space to help victims of domestic violence. Romeca's death is becoming a catalyst for change, a rallying point for a community determined to protect others from similar fates. Online, the Justice for Romeca Meeks movement has grown. Social media platforms became organizing tools for vigils, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns. Petitions demanding accountability gathered thousands of signatures. People who never met Romeca felt connected to her story because it represents something larger: the vulnerability of mothers, the failures of systems meant to protect, and the urgent need for reform. Looking ahead, the legal process will continue to unfold over the coming months. Johnson's next court appearance is scheduled for February 3rd, 2026, for a status hearing. From there, the case will move through pretrial motions, discovery, and eventually, if no plea deal is reached, a trial. The prosecution will present its case that Johnson committed premeditated murder. They'll call witnesses who saw the confrontation, present forensic evidence from the scene, and likely bring in experts to discuss the nature of the gunshot wounds and the timeline of events. The defense will counter with their self-defense argument, attempting to paint Romeca as the aggressor and Johnson as a woman in fear for her life. Self-defense cases are notoriously complex. The burden is on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Johnson did not act in lawful self-defense. But several factors work against Johnson's claim. First, she had the option to leave. She walked back to her car to retrieve the gun, giving her an opportunity to drive away instead. Second, witnesses report a pause between the first shot and the subsequent shots. That pause suggests deliberation, not panic. Third, the celebratory fist bump with Smith immediately after the shooting undermines any narrative of fear or remorse. Those details matter in the eyes of a jury. The additional charges filed against Johnson add complexity. While we don't have complete details on all 5 counts, prosecutors often add charges like aggravated battery with a firearm, unlawful use of a weapon, or reckless conduct when shooting occurs near a school or in the presence of children. Each charge carries its own potential penalties, and the cumulative effect can mean decades in prison if Johnson is convicted on all counts. The prosecution strategy seems clear: leave no room for a lenient outcome. Build a case so comprehensive that a jury has no choice but to convict. Of course, the defense will argue otherwise. They'll scrutinize every witness statement, question the handling of evidence, and attempt to poke holes in the timeline. They'll try to shift the narrative, painting Johnson as a woman who feared for her safety and acted in a split-second moment of terror. But that's a hard sell when the evidence suggests otherwise. What's at stake here goes beyond one woman's conviction. This case has become emblematic of larger societal issues. Domestic violence remains a leading cause of death for women in the United States. Protective orders are supposed to provide safety, but they're only as effective as the systems that enforce them. Johnson had an order against Romeca that was never served. Romeca reportedly had an order against Carlos Smith. These orders existed on paper, but did nothing to prevent the confrontation that led to her death. That's a systemic failure. Then there's the issue of gun access. Johnson legally owned her firearm and had a concealed carry license. She passed background checks. She followed the legal process. But having legal access to a weapon doesn't mean using it is justified. The case raises uncomfortable questions about who should have access to firearms, especially in situations involving active protective orders or documented domestic disputes. If someone files protective order alleging fear for their safety, should they also be allowed to carry a concealed weapon to locations where they might encounter that person? It's a legal and ethical gray area that deserves more scrutiny. Romeca's life mattered. She was studying to become a nurse, a profession dedicated to healing and care. She was a loving mother who left a heartfelt note for her son on the morning she died, telling him how proud she was of him and calling it a fresh start. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She had dreams and plans. And all of that was stolen in seconds because of jealousy, rage, and a gun. Her son will grow up without his mother. He'll have memories, stories told by his grandmother, and the love of a community that refuses to forget her. But he'll never have her back. That's the permanent cost of this violence. That's what the justice system is trying to address. But no verdict can undo that loss. As the trial approaches, the community will be watching. Romeca's family will be in that courtroom, seeking the accountability they were denied for 3 long months after her death. They'll hear testimony that forces them to relive the worst day of their lives. They'll see the woman accused of killing their loved one and hear her defense. It will be painful, exhausting, and necessary. The outcome of this case will reverberate. A conviction would send a message that violence, especially violence disguised as self-defense, will not be tolerated. It would validate the community's outrage and provide some measure of closure for Romeca's family. An acquittal would be devastating, raising questions about what it takes to hold someone accountable in cases where domestic disputes turn deadly. Justice for Romeca Meeks Blackman means more than a guilty verdict. It means systemic change. It means resources for victims. It means accountability for those who fail to protect. It means a community coming together to say enough is enough. And it means remembering her not just as a victim, but as a person whose life had value and whose death demands something better from all of us. If you found this update powerful and important, share it with someone who should know the truth behind this case. Don't miss out. Make sure you're subscribed so you're the first to know about the next twist in this story. This isn't just about following a case. It's about standing with community demanding justice, honoring a mother whose life was cut short, and pushing for changes that could prevent the next tragedy. Stay informed. Stay engaged. Stay human.